that's how you survive along the way, is by doing what is helpful to an amazing group of people with no specific expectation of what'll ever come back your way. Mm-hmm. That's how you win.
All right. Hi there. I'm Patrick Ewers. I'm the founder and CEO of Mindmaven, a coaching organization that focuses on help them achieve their fullest potential by focusing on relationships. And we do that particularly by first and foremost trying to free up 10 to 12 hours a week by teaching them how to change their working relationship with resources as similar to an EA and a chief of staff. But that's enough about me. I'm super thrilled today to be joined by Adam Katz of Corriant, based in New York. It's a private wealth advisory firm. And the one thing I have to tell you guys, before you now turn off and say, hey, I don't want to hear from a private advisor today, hear me out, because Adam is first and foremost an entrepreneur. Not only an entrepreneur, but one that I think has an amazing story to tell about how you can be successful focusing on relationships. And so, because I want you to hear me out. And so let me tell you the story of Adam as far as I know it. So Adam spent about 20 years working in private wealth at Merrill Lynch in various capacities, but one day woke up and realized there must be a better way of doing private wealth. And so despite the fact that everything looked and pointed to him being a lifer, he ended up starting his own private wealth company called Core Private Wealth. And did that so with a real clear focus on saying, I'm going to be successful by leveraging the fact that business is about humans. And putting humans first, even in that specific space. Therefore, you probably understand now why I'm so excited to have him on board. But more importantly is to look at what happened, because he did that in, I think, the summer of 2018 and ended up being able to sell this company only 5 years later.
4
years later. There you go. That's right. See, today
wasn't the plan.
It wasn't the plan, but it was a multi-million-dollar exit. And I will challenge you guys to find anybody, even in our startup environment, that is capable of pulling something like this off in that speed. It's just really rare. And so that's why I'm super thrilled to have you here, Adam, and to, have you take us along your journey and the evolvement of your thinking as you built it. And so, if you don't mind, I'll start with the first question and really tell me about what caused you to say there must be a better way, and the better way is focusing on relationships right before you decided, like, we're going to do this core private wealth thing.
Yeah. And out of fairness, I want to make sure there's attribution. I had some partners, so I didn't do this alone. I think the way I thought about the business was unique, but was, really glad to have great partners along the way. But when I started in the business, I took an approach that people thought looked crazy, which looked way more analogous to a venture capitalist than to being a private wealth advisor. I'd go out in meetings and I'd chat with people at LPQ, at WeWork. This is sort of the 2010, 2013 era of New York tech. And I just spend all my day helping people with what mattered to them most, because no one needed me. They didn't have any money yet. But I realized that in the startup community, which is really where I clustered, they all needed talent for their teams. They needed capital for the business. They needed revenue. And I started spending my day connecting to them to those things that mattered to them most. In the classic Eisenhower matrix, I said, hey, if I can live in their important and urgent box, they're never going to reject me, because all I'm doing is helping them with things that they've told me they need help with. And it was just a way more fun way to spend my day. So I'd meet someone and they'd say, I'd be like, what's most important to you? They're like, man, I need a COO. And I'll say, oh, I've got a great friend who's at this firm right now and hates their life. They're just an investment banker. It's boring as hell. They've been doing it for a decade. The path is not what they experienced, and they would love to meet you. And suddenly I became a headhunter. Or I'd say, oh, I was just meeting with this family the other day. They made a lot of money in the pharma space and they love working on startup biotech. Would you like to meet them? And suddenly I just became a helper, but it confused the hell out of the community, because years later, I would hear all the time people behind the scenes be like, what's Adam's angle? Like, he doesn't make any money anywhere. How's he ever going to do this? And my viewpoint was, I wanted to be these people's advisors for years before they ever became a client, because by the time we got there, there was a real relationship that we had formed. So just a very different approach, the proverbial long game that everyone says that they play. My joke is that most people should probably introduce themselves as, hey, I'm Adam, short-term transactional guy. But everyone says that they're long-term. I just think most people don't have the mindset of, again, doing what matters most to people, even if it's not you today. And it may never be you. And I think that's the hardest part.
I got two reactions. One is many people listening to us saying, wait, that's a mega long game. It must be exceptionally hard to actually be successful in that way. And how do you do it? And the other one that I want to touch on first is that, the likelihood that COO candidate that I know will actually end up being the person who joins that organization seems indefinitely small, right? But, I wouldn't be surprised if you would agree with that. Your experience agrees with this, that very often, and this is something that very few people realize, that very often it's not that important that the value you offer gets consumed, but that actually 90% of the value experience is the intent you're showing, right? That Adam is going out of his way to find a candidate. Even if that candidate ends up not joining, you as Adam win almost as much goodwill as if that person actually joins.
Well, that you're hitting it on the head, is that all I did for years was look at my introduction activity. Those were my goals. It was making introductions that were really meaningful. And the win for the week was never assets and revenue, because to me, assets and revenue in a business like mine are massive lagging indicators of success. Success was, man, you introduced me to that COO. Not really a great fit for me, but my other friend who started another company, he's exactly who she's looking for.
Yeah, stuff like that must have happened all the time.
It happened all the time. And it was so fun because, again, suddenly my name landing in their inbox didn't look like someone ever looking to sell anything to them. I was a helper. And people would just introduce me to each other all the time. And they'd be like, well, I see he's at Merrill Lynch. And what? They're like, no, just trust me. He's going to help you. And it was just a way more fun way to spend my day in a seat that should get rejected 99% of the time. I pretty much rarely ever got rejected because I was just spending my time helping people with what mattered to them most. But your point would then be like, okay, but you have to make some money at some point, either for your team or for yourself, because you've got to survive along the way. And so how does that work? It sort of felt like that was the sort of your first initial. People saying, well, you have a daytime business and you do have to make revenue, so how did you balance this? This is the best. So I was sitting with one of my real close friends, Mark, who runs a super successful private credit fund now. And we're sitting there about 5 years into the journey. And I'm telling him what I'm doing and how I spend my time, people's important urgent boxes. Like, it's brilliant. He said, but how are you doing? Like, are you making any money? And I said, oh yeah, I'm in the top 1% of the advisors at Merrill who started when I did. He's like, well, hold on, I'm going to call bullshit. So then how could those two things coexist? And I said, because what I didn't realize, and I came up with an analogy of seed planting versus tree shaking. So if you'll indulge me for about a minute, I'll give the analogy.
Please.
Most people who are in business development and private wealth go onto the field and see the biggest lush tree they can possibly find. And we can be quite literal and somewhat figurative that the leaves are the money. And so people sprint to those trees. And my comment is, by the time you get closer to the tree, you realize there's a ring of tree shakers, right? Because it's visible. Everyone can see it. And I would make my jokes that I'm going to throw things at it. I'm going to get out a saw. I'm going to try to be creative. And so what I ended up doing, which is what I've already been talking about, is I ended up finding myself on the other side of the field where there was no tree and therefore no people, because it was just a sea beneath the surface. And by providing introductions for capital, talent, revenue, I became the sustenance. Mm-hmm. And my vision was, in 5 to 10 years, a lot of these seeds will go through their sapling phase and become this robust tree. The difference is there I'm part of the trunk, the root system. On the other side of the field, I'm an annoyance. And I never wanted to be an annoyance. Who would want to be? That doesn't make you feel good. But what I never expected, and this is the real trick, is that when the big lush trees need help, they don't really look at the tree shakers, the annoyances. They go inward to their own trunk and their root system. And that root system was connected to all these people I had been helping for years and years and years. And even if they didn't already have the wealth, they had the respect of those folks. So what started happening was I would start getting calls from people who were quite wealthy. And I never called them. They called me and they said, hey, I'm looking for someone like you. These two entrepreneurs I think the world of that I've been backing told me you're the guy and I'd love to meet with you. And so it allowed me along the way to start really building a business that was pretty big pretty quickly, but not nearly as parabolic as what eventually happened with the real activity of really cultivating these relationships. So that's sort of how I bridge the gap.
Let me sum this up in my own words because this is so powerful. I hope everybody who's watching is really trying to take this in, because the way I reflect this back to you right now is that basically, yes, private wealth people are known to be annoying because everybody is shaking the same tree, showing up at the time when it is actually too late. You say, look, if you're in this business or any kind of relationship business, because this translates to almost anything, I will take any challenge up and say, this is still the right way to operate. 100%. Is that you basically built relationships so early with people that you become part of that root system, right?
Exactly.
And so no matter what you think right now, this long game, if you are basically starting off, you're 23 or 24 and you do this for 10 years, you will end up like Adam. It's basically inevitable. It's a path to success. The dividends are going to be brutal of doing this behavior. I'm 100% behind that. But here's the interesting thing. I want to give you guys doubters who might be doubting this approach or saying, I wouldn't have that long of a run rate, is that what you will find along the way is that in that field where nobody else is, there might be already some trees that just don't have leaves, but you just show up in that field when the leaves are popping up before anybody else comes, right? And so it isn't that barren and that long term, because as you do it, it's a numbers game. The more you do it, the more you'll actually stumble across these trees that have about to get some leaves, but you're still there doing things of value to them before they know that they have leaves to a certain degree.
And the activity element of what I did is the thing that sort of the survivorship bias in so many professions and stories is so strong. And I used to do 1,000 in-person meetings a year. Once we went a little bit more virtual through COVID, I went up to a couple of thousand meetings a year.
Yes.
And what it allows you to do is create amazing pattern recognition by hearing and listening to a clustering of common fears, common things that people are excited about. Because all I do all day long is solve people's lives. This is not a wealth management role. This is way more analogous to coaching. I was on with a client today, not your kind of coaching, Patrick. I'm not at that level.
Fair enough.
But I was on with a client today who's, he's I would say a pretty strong unicorn in the New York ecosystem. I've been working with him for 5-6 years. He's already pretty liquid on paper. He's probably worth, I don't know, $500 million. We never talk about the money. We talk about the life. And today we were really getting into some deep stuff around his life pie. In my mind, we all only have 24 hours and 7 days. And you've got to be really intentional about what your life pie looks like and when certain pieces need to go bigger and shrink. And he's in a really important period of some familial stress around health issues. And not only is there health issues, but there's distance and time zones. And he fortunately is in a chairman role right now, and he's not in a CEO role. And it's really allowing him to spend with intentionality the time. So we're talking about it today, and I'm pushing him hard and asking him probing questions. He's like, man, it's so hard to explain to people what you do for a living and what you do for me. He's like, you're just the person. He's like, you help me set up all this optionality with these cool trust structures and all this tax stuff. And you did all of that, but that's not really what you do. You created optionality, but you more importantly understood what motivates me and where is my fear. And then the stuff you do all day long are just funding mechanisms to allow me to live my life in a way that is so frictionless with the least amount of stress. And whether there was an insurance policy or some trust structure or some investment, you never talked about it that way. You just talked about what you were solving for, because all you did was got to know me over all these times. And then knowing what I cared about or what I was fearful of, you'd say, hey, this is the best way to solve for it with closest amount of certainty. Do you want to do this thing? So it's always about the why, which we all talk about, not the what. But it's so easy as a crutch for most people to drill in on the what first to try to prove knowledge and domain expertise. Whereas in my mind, knowledge and domain expertise in my world is understanding sort of the way in which a brain deals with massively unusual outcomes of life and the judgment and expectation that comes along with that, and really teaching people how to navigate as both a guide ahead of them, with the headlamp on in a pretty scary cave, but also the co-pilot and being there right next to them with a real pari passu outcome.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So there's something exceptionally powerful hidden under what you just said. And let me see if my reframing of that is actually something you would agree with, because at the end of the day, I'm sure you have that too. I talk to a lot of young people and they come to me and say, hey, you know what? I want to build my network. I want to be successful. I want to have a network of powerful people. But the one thing I struggle with is that what I do and I want to sell to them or offer to them is not necessarily that high on their relevancy. Right. And so a lot of people struggle with being relevant. And frankly, to get back to your analogy, the people that shake the tree to get the leaves, they're basically only using one tool to be relevant, and that tool is not that relevant. Therefore, that shaking feels a little bit like annoying. And so the solution you're offering up to our audience here is basically an exceptionally powerful thing. Just do one thing, and that is find what is relevant for them. You like to use the importance and urgency aspect of it, and that's a great angle to look at it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it is, just be relevant. It can be like, be that person that person turns to just have somebody who's listening to them and is actually pushing them harder than anybody else is, because everybody else has their own agenda and you don't have to have it, right? And that's why I totally believe that it's in some form or others, just be a coach to the other people. And by doing that, you get the benefits that we just described. And the one benefit that I wanted to bring up before we go deeper into maybe a few more examples by you is, and I'm stretching this analogy you gave us here to the impossible, but you're like working on that field with saplings while the others are on that other field with a lot of trees. But you gave us a very important example of what might happen, that these saplings have a root system that actually might even connect all the way to that field with the trees with the big
it does.
Leaves, right? You get access to those trees in a way that you aren't annoying.
And to be clear, that's what I meant. If I didn't say it as clearly, is that suddenly I'd have people with $100 million that everyone knows who they are. They're shaking. They calling me because again, I'm helping people in their network that they believe are smart, maybe not as wealthy as them yet. And those people that I've been helping are like, no, you got to call Adam. And so it's exactly that. I'm glad you reemphasized to make sure people understood. That's how you survive along the way, is by doing what is helpful to an amazing group of people with no specific expectation of what'll ever come back your way. That's how you win.
And so
and it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazingly fun because, who doesn't want that call?
It's a much more fun existence to be helping people all day than trying to annoy people or sell them something that maybe they don't actually need.
And so it's fun, but basically also successful, right? And the whole point is that if any of you guys in the beginning wanted to say, well, I can't do this for XYZ reason because I don't have that type of patience or long run. The whole point that Adam, that you're making is look, yes, it looks like in the beginning, like it's a much longer path, but it actually might be a shortcut to have a competitive advantage that none of the others ever will be able to do because they're trying to go straight towards it.
1,000%.
What feels like a detour is actually probably the fastest way you could ever find to be successful by using relationships.
And just, I know you and I, as we've chatted, we've had the privilege of getting to know each other a little bit. I've come up with a little funny moniker of, it's not biz dev as in business development. It's ship dev as in relationship development. And maybe one day somehow business will come. But if your true, pure mindset is, I just want to develop relationships, two things happen. One is I do believe you have massively parabolic growth at some point. Mm-hmm. And you have way more fun, because I'll get off of calls with people and they'll be a half hour in. They'll be like, wow, this was totally different than I thought it would be. I'm like, all good. I'm like, well, was it helpful? They're like, no, this is unbelievably helpful. And then they'll say things like, but why did you spend your time helping me? And I'll say, well, especially in the video era, I'm like, I don't know, were you smiling, you think, during our call? They're like, well, I hope so. Was your body language, were you engaged? Like, yeah, I hope so. How do you think that made me feel? Like, I don't know. I hope it made you feel really good. I said it did. So maybe I just used you to put myself in even better mood, to be an awesome husband, dad, business partner, advisor. And I'm saying it tongue in cheek, but sort of not, in that, I don't know, if I can spend as close to 100% of my day helping people and getting amazing human feedback, what an amazing way to spend life. And that's a lot of how I have a lot of intentionality. Definitely need to play that proverbial long game, which most say they do. It's very hard to both find the environment, Patrick, that will let you play the long game. And you personally, both with a brain, have to be able to get there, and out of fairness financially. I think the brain part's most interesting, where I talk a lot about time. During my daughter's bat mitzvah, I actually was on the bima giving a speech, and I talked about time. Because time's funny, whether you're looking retrospectively or prospectively. So the next year is 100% of what's in front of us for that 1 year. But in 20 years, that same year is only 5%. Mm-hmm. So if you can jump ahead 3 years, 5 years, or 20 years, the next year doesn't feel so urgent.
Yes.
And that allows you to really be patient. And when a few months goes by and someone you were trying to talk to had to cancel and they went on vacation, then what's 3 months? But if you're suddenly making 3 months everything and all the time in the world, then you're going to create urgency. So I feel like that's a big thing also, is trying to transport yourself a year ahead, 3 years ahead, 10 years ahead. And it'll make some of what feels urgent today, in terms of you feeling like you maybe need to be a little overbearing on follow-up, or urgency to try to translate some way you could be a little bit more relevant to this person. But if you can continue to jump ahead in some type of time machine, it really changes the way the other person feels, and by definition, the way they react to you and how you feel.
Adam, I'm going to not even continue here, because it's time for us to wrap up. And that was such a perfect monologue that I hope everybody will take home. I want to just reflect upon this in my own words. What I heard you say is this: I hope that in these 20 minutes, we were able to convince everybody listening that this is the way to go, to be successful. And not only to be successful, probably be successful beyond your wildest dreams. You had a feeling that that would be true for you. You ran after it. And basically what you got in return was probably way more than you ever thought was possible. I bet you still have today, day to day, moments where you just are surprised about how powerful that is. So that's number one. But the most important thing that I think you are saying to everybody is like, look, most of us have only about an average of 80 years on this planet. There's just no time to fuck around chasing something that actually isn't meaningful for us. And what you're saying is, by operating in that way, you are actually going to live a life that will feel meaningful, that will feel fulfilled, and first and foremost happy, and frankly, just fun. And so go out and find any other opportunity or any other approach that you can have, that you can pursue, that allows you to be wildly successful and happy at the same time. You will only find it if you center around this notion of being human first and focusing on relationships. And that's basically what I think we're giving as a gift to everybody who's listening today. And so, Adam, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking the questions.